So hello and welcome to this video on the 2HP Verb. Now I should say that even though this is tiny and it's hard to shoot a video with this stuff because it's kind of dwarfed by the modules that are around it, but don't be fooled by the size. It is in no way of lesser quality. It's a nice high quality, really lush, thick stereo reverb that's great as a send effect or just a sound design type tool. So let's dive into how it sounds, its features, and then we'll go through some various patches. So this is a true stereo in, stereo out. We have a time control, which will go from a smaller room to kind of infinite, big, lush, endlessly echoing hall type sound. A damp to control the tone, a mix amount, and a CV for the mix amount, which is great being pulled around by some sample and hold that I'll show in a patch later. And then a stereo out. It will do mono in to stereo out, which is how we're going to start. So I'm going to manually just fade in some oscillator sounds. And let's play around with the time, damp, mix, and see what sounds we can get. First, my sound totally dry. Just a detuned analog oscillator style sound. Mix at half, time and damp all the way down. And you can hear right off the bat that it's a nice rich verb. Time, let's say around half. And time up full. Make sure you're listening in good speakers or headphones, and especially in stereo. Let's turn the damp up and do that again. So damp around half. Much more top end. Time up around half. Time up full, damp at half. Let's do that fully wet. And let's just go damp up full and play around with that time, and I'm fully wet. So let's get in some various patches, modulating the mix, mono in, stereo out, stereo in, stereo out. And let's see how this thing plays out in some different patches. So to give you more of an idea of the sound of Verb, here's just a quick patch with a ton of different sounds coming in, droning at the input. Now this is a stereo input, it's the main output and the auxiliary output of a mutable instrument's Platts. The sound is going to be weighted to the left because that auxiliary output, which is the right input on the Verb, isn't always as active. It's sometimes slightly quieter, less information in the waves. But here's just a dry sound. I'm modulating the modes, harmonics, timbre, morph. Let's just have a quick listen to this input being modulated around. So let's pull up the Verb. And let's modulate that mix. The waveform on data is my LFO that's going to modulate the mix. Slightly faster LFO. again on the data screen. So there's just a few more sounds and modulating the mix with an LFO over some drone-in, heavily modulated weirdness. So in this video, let's check out modulating that mix amount over a stereo mix. So I have a rather frantic beat patched up with the modules that you can see here. The 2HP Verb is off screen, so I'll pull a little overlay in. I've got a stereo mix coming out of my stereo mixer. Just to highlight what's actually stereo on that mix, let's first kill the modulation of Verb, again just up off screen. Pan hard left is this 2HP pluck, modulated by some noise and some fast modulation for a little percussive sound to go with the drums. That's hard left. Then I have this sound panned hard right. My main drums in mono. Let's get these two stereo elements back in. And you can hear that stereo out of this mixer to stereo in on the Verb is perfect stereo pass-through. Now here's the reverb just over this with no modulation. Time and damp all the way down. I'm just going to bring the mix up. Bring the time up. And then I'll bring the mix back up, but then play with the damp while time is up full. It's absolutely huge. Let's try that with a damp down. Now backing those off, the noise is coming from these modules and the compression and distortion I'm using. I'm going to modulate that mix again. And let's hit play. So those little bursts of reverb are coming from a clocked sample and hold, clocked in time with this beat. I can bring the mix up to influence that amount of mix. It's still an offset that will add this CV to it. Let's bring that mix up to around half. And that's frantically and quite quickly modulating the mix over this beat. So here we're using the Verb just mono in, mono out, left in, left out. And what I've done is patch up my oscillator that's quite modulated, that's just droning into the Verb, and then the Verb is going into the VCA. So rather than the reverb being at the end, this will also be part of this VCA pushing and pulling this sound in and out. Now my VCA is modulated by an envelope. I'll just let you hear that for a second. Sounds fade in and out. Now if I just turn up my reverb, you can hear that's pre-VCA, not post. And I really like this idea of this huge cavernous space, but it closing on and off. It doesn't quite sound normal to us. A reverb that big we'd expect to just bloom and blossom across the whole mix. Now we can set more subtle settings. And it almost sounds like a modulated chorus kind of fast delay line. But So let's patch in some modulation. I'm going to use wobbler, seeing as it's right next to it. And it just adds this other layer of dimension to the oscillator before it goes on to the rest of the patch. Now, a patch that I always find fun with effects is feedback, and in this case I'm just patching the Verb as the sound source, and that is it. So I'm using a joystick to create a voltage that I can manually control and be quite gestural with. The 0 to 5 volts coming out of the joystick is this yellow trace on data. If I just move the joystick down, you can see that voltage has gone down. My outputs, left is going into the Mordex data scope, so you can see the waveform at the bottom. There we go. I'm splitting it back on itself with this red stackable cable up into the left input. The right output is going straight to my mixer, and the split from this stackable just coming out of data, it's just in so we can see it and then back out again, are patched left and right. So left audio split and into data, right into the mixer. So this is in stereo, but I'm just patching the left back on itself. And I'm controlling the mix with this yellow trace on data, this joystick voltage. And we can create a lot of nice variation, especially with that damp and time. So let's play with those and play around with this voltage. I'm going to be quite gestural and ride that feedback. So watch the voltage on top and listen and watch how the output responds to the feedback. You can hear it kicking in. Now it's quiet, but it's getting there. And those lower settings take a while to kind of coax out this feedback tone. Turning these up full, it comes much quicker and is much more aggressive. And there's kind of two tones going on. Let's just go over to Spectrum Analyzer. You can see this main tone. And the overtones that come in from that harsher feedback. It sounds great. I love playing around with gestural feedback networks. And that's just one module. We could patch out into something else like a filter, or put this around another module that's in a feedback loop. Again, be creative, try things in different places. Reverb isn't just for the end of the chain. So for this final patch, let's use this as a send and return over a mixer. Really standard use for a reverb, but Verb sounds great. I'm using the Bafako mixer, and here's the send going to the reverb. I'll quickly just walk you through the tracks. First track is this synth riff, and let's send this to the Verb. Have a sub playing a similar line. On 2, kick on 3, low tom and clap on 4, and hat on 5. So this is mono out to the left in on the Verb and stereo coming back. And I'll just play out with this patch. I'll send different parts of the patch out to the Verb in different mixes, play around with the time and damp settings so you can hear it over this mix. Hit like, subscribe, comment, leave any questions. I'll be sure to get back to you. Go support me on Patreon if you'd like extra bonus exclusive content over there, and also to fund this public content Watch out for a couple more 2HP Tuesdays videos coming over the next couple of weeks. And let's just play around with this over the mix. Cheers.